Good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight. You are with the Urban Debate. I'm Seher Zama. I remember when the Maternity Benefit Amendment Act 2017 that came into existence to raise paid maternity leave from just 12 weeks of what we had earlier to more than a double of 26 weeks. It was one of the proudest moments. India became the third most progressive country in the world on this front. But we are now today, 1 year down the line. There are signs that this very law can cause 1.8 million women their loss of jobs across 10 sectors. Most companies do not want to bear the cost of this paid leave. There is no tax incentive that is offered to them. Is it already time that we relook at this law for yet another amendment?
We had recommended 8 months, but 8 months was considered to be too long for the employer. So the Labour Ministry and the government as a whole thought that 6.5 months is reasonable. And I think that, yes, it's true. It is a reasonable time.
The centre's bold move to empower working women places India among developed countries that make it a law to grant 26 weeks of fully paid leave to new mothers. But nearly 1 year after the maternity law was amended, staffing agency TeamLease paints a grim picture predicting that women hiring will dip over maternity leave. A report by TeamLease Services has revealed that the amendments made to the Maternity Benefit Act, wherein the maternity leave for working women was increased from 12 weeks to 26 weeks, is likely to cause job loss. Mirror now reached out to the Women and Child Development Ministry, which is still optimistic. In fact, they're certain this move will not have an adverse effect on job opportunities for women.
ये जो 12 सप्ताह से बढ़ाकर जो 26 सप्ताह किया गया है, ये एक आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के द्वारा एक बड़ा ही अच्छा कदम उठाया गया है. उस अवधि में वो माँ अपने बच्चे की देखरेख ठीक ढंग से कर सकेगी.
The reality on the ground for working women, however, seems to be different. Small and mid-sized companies are considered maternity leave a burden. Mirror now asks, is India shortchanging mothers? Is the government's progressive maternity law backfiring? Do companies want benefits to grant maternity benefit?
All right, let's throw this open to our panelists tonight. We have Rituparna Chakrabarti, who's the president of Indian Staffing Federation, co-founder of TeamLease. Vineet Goenka, who's the member governing council, CRIS, former convener of the BJP IT cell. K. Sudarshan, managing partner, EMA Partners India and regional vice president Asia, EMA Partners International. Karuna Nandi with us, senior lawyer of the Supreme Court. Raman Talwar, founder, director and CEO of Similarness, and Ritvika Bhattacharya, author and activist. Let me get my first question here to Rituparna first. Rituparna, regarding the survey here that has been done across 10 sectors with respect to speaking to 300 employers across the country, the government, of course, is turning this down as a mere projection, not reality. So help us understand the process here that was followed to collect this nature of data, the exhaustive process here to collect data which indicates that the very law which was made to benefit us, working mothers, pregnant mothers, expecting mothers, can perhaps backfire in the coming year.
Yeah, hi. So I think when the bill was passed or amendment last year, I was one of those who were really optimistic and felt that the intent was just right. And given that most working mothers, after having a child, usually are not able to come back to the workforce within 3 months. Inevitably, that gets extended by another couple of months at least, and hence giving them 26 weeks off where they can peacefully take care of the child and come back does or did make sense. However, over the last year, through different conversations that I've been having with industries, I was getting a mixed sense of what really is going on at the ground level. And we chose to conduct a study. 300 companies were surveyed, and 10 sectors we specifically chose were the most critical, prominent in terms of the employment activity that's currently going on. For paucity of time, we could not really cover the entire, all the 67 odd industries. But just by covering these 10 sectors, we realized that there seems to be an immediate impact and a panic. Interestingly, out of the 10 sectors, 3 sectors, which is IT, BPO, ITS, and e-commerce, they seemed extremely positive. They believe that this particular change is going to improve the diversity equation within the organizations. They also believe that it's going to reduce post-maternity attrition. However, a large number of sectors like education, aviation, retail, healthcare, BFSI, they actually came back saying they do sense and they've already started seeing an immediate reduction in hiring of women employees. And that's probably the matter of concern.
Yes.
However, overall, everybody does believe that in the medium to long run, it is going to be beneficial. However, the point is that especially the SME segment, the startup ecosystem, even some large, however, privately and family owned, we see this impact most prominent, the adverse impact or the negative sentiments most prominent amongst these segments.
Okay.
So for the startup and SME, the thought process is largely around, we first need to survive and grow our business for us to be able to hire more women. And the sudden increase in the burden, which is from 3 months to 6 months, is making it difficult for us. Yes, if one gets down to doing the maths, this looks like an investment for higher productivity and higher gains, but the question is, how does one manage the immediate situation and the immediate crisis which has emerged? And I think the entire report was just to encourage, or rather maybe get people to talk about this issue so that we can together come out with recommendations to deal with the current situation.
All right. All right, well put. Of course, this has been an extremely holistic approach, large numbers taken into account, and which is how these results have been obtained for a conclusion for your survey here. Vineet Goenka, in your view, we've gotten exclusive reactions here with respect to prominent voices that have spoken, MOS of the concerned ministry, Women and Child Development, Secretary of the ministry there as well, outright turning down the findings here of this survey. Is that the right way to go ahead? Because at the end of the day, this survey also well-intended, well-meaning to bring about the positive results of this maternity law on ground. But on ground, we are seeing an initial panic.
See, I'll tell you, the entire idea behind this changes which the Prime Minister Modi introduced was for a Divya Bharat. That is, today's woman who is working there is not only a mother of a child, but she is going to give birth to the next Bharat which is going to come out. So we have to give her all the protections and all the benefits which she requires. So one is that. Number two is that who is doing this survey? He should have some credibility. Now, this would be done by FICCI, CIA, NASSCOM, IMC, BMC, MIT or CKS, or maybe Times of India, then we would have taken this very seriously. Nowadays, it is a business to just get up and do some survey and do that. Number two, what is the quantity? When you do a sampling survey in a country of 125 crore people, what should be the sample size? It cannot be 300. So what you do is you choose 300 people and come out with some kind of finding and let the world come out and defend it. So that's the biggest challenge. So this is very funny. And this is the first time where I have heard where such kind of radical changes, such kinds of reforms which have been introduced will lead to the problem. Whereas I have different data. If you want, I can give you the data. Now, Indian Railways itself, if you take, RPF is going to employ more than 4,500 people there. Now, 3,000 positions have been given for sub-inspector. More than 4,200 positions have been given for constables, for female constable within RPF. Now, I can go on with this kind of list if you want. So we'll have to see who is doing the survey. Had it been IMC, NASSCOM, FICCI, Times of India, I would have believed it. But not with this kind of some TeamLease. Somebody just mushroom organization comes up and gives some kind of survey and tells us to debate. I think there are more serious things to be debated on this kind of prime time.
Okay. Ritu Parna, would you like to react to that? Credibility of your survey that is being questioned here?
And the quantity also, 125 crore people and 300 samples. What is this funniness? It's a simply funny.
Okay, let Ritu respond.
No, I think the sample is let me just get this. Yeah, I think 300 companies were surveyed, and hence I do not understand the comparison of the 125 crore people. For us, I mean, finally, we are trying to solve a problem. Finally, we are trying to contribute towards nation building, and it doesn't really get achieved when half of our population stands exposed to a particular problem. I think this should not be made out into a political discussion. Finally, like I said, we started with the premise that, of course, it's a move which was probably done with good intentions, and I think we should continue to view it. However, it's important to look at day-to-day realities. If this was done with the intent of improving women workforce participation, which is, by the way, some of the lowest one of the lowest in the world, which is just about 27%, then I think if anything is impacting us in terms of achieving that objective, we should have an open mind to look at what are these observations. These are observations and feedback and insight.
Now, some random company cannot come and tell us that we should have an open mind.
Segments.
No, but it is. Let's not get personal about this, Vineet. There's nothing random about TeamLease. No. This is a well-intended survey. It has reached out to prominent people across 10 sectors. TeamLease has been operational, has been in existence for the past decade, for the past 10 years. Let's not belittle the efforts of the findings which are meant well with the intention of implementing the maternity law to its absolute best. Vineet, you are taking this personally. This is a very unfair attitude to have. You are taking this personally.
No, not unfair, but nobody can come out and just speak.
It would be fair to also go through the details of this survey. Given that TeamLease has not just mushroomed out of the blue suddenly in the past week, they've been around for the past decade.
It doesn't
So
make any
Darshan,
sense.
would you like to step in at this point? Would you like to step in at this point in observing what the maternity law states, and as per an employer, the burden of that entire cost that has to be borne of the paid leave by the employer?
Okay, so
Vineet, you're drowning my voice and my other panelist's voice as well. I'm not going to have this shouting match with you. Please be silent.
Okay, Zair. See, firstly, I think...
Not 300 people, 300 employers. One employee would perhaps be catering to 100 people. So, Darshan, step in at this point.
This country has more than 2.5 crore employers, madam.
1.8 million. We are talking 20 lakh, 18 lakh jobs.
Let's LinkedIn survey, what the LinkedIn says. What is Hindu Business Line says.
Okay, Vineet, let me just make a point. So, we are talking of 18-20 lakh jobs, which I think as a headline, it's a bit, it is alarmist, because it is data which is probably extrapolated, which is what Rituparna can perhaps come back and clarify how they arrived at the 18 lakh jobs. It is obviously alarmist. So, and firstly, because we have to consider that 90% of the women in India are employed in the unorganized sector. So, these numbers look really large, to me at least as an observer.
Okay.
But I still continue to maintain...
But in conclusion of what the report says, the reason why that they arrived at this conclusion is because you have a set of
I would like to understand how did we arrive at 20 lakhs? What is the science behind this 20 lakhs?
Employing women or perhaps bearing the burden of the paid maternity leave. Let's leave the figure aside.
No, but look,
I think... Tell me as an employer.
No, 1 second, sir. We are having this debate.
Tell me as an employer, because the maternity law does not provide any tax benefits or provisions for the employer to be bearing the burden of this paid maternity leave. So,
we have said this
say it again. Tell me.
No, we have said this before, that the government obviously should do more, but this is the right step in the right direction, and this move should not backfire for reasons which are not where the government does not provide support for the right kind of organizations. We are saying that MSME, SME organizations should probably be provided, some sort of tax incentives or support so that they continue to employ more women. So that is one. But the larger point is this, we are right now having this debate because somebody said 20 lakh jobs, right? So which is what I think it's a bit alarmist. I'm just repeating that point because we need to have a basis for these kind of, to come up with these kind of numbers.
I don't want you to stick to the figure because we are not taking the figure as gospel truth either. Leave the figure aside, please. I'm only asking you
that is what the headline says, right, sir? Everywhere we are talking 20 lakh jobs
lost, from the figure, let me decide the talking point of the question I want to ask you. I just want your view, Sudarshan, here on this. In what the conclusion also states with respect to the findings, with respect to the figure that they've arrived at, that employers are showing hesitation because there are no incentives or tax benefits that are stated in this maternity law for the employer to be bearing the entire cost of this paid maternity leave. Yes or no? Yeah. Are employers facing the heat of that?
Answer is, for the large organizations, they were already doing a lot of things for their women employees, even without this Maternity Benefit Act. So that's point number one. We deal with very large companies. We also deal with startups. We also work with mid-sized companies. So far, in the last 1 year, nobody has ever come back and told us that we don't want to hire a woman. So if there is, maybe it is unstated, but in our experience, we've not seen this kind of a situation.
has changed in the past 1 year because earlier we were dealing with a chunk of just 12 weeks of paid maternity leave, and now we are dealing with 26, which is more than double of that. Yeah. So 26 weeks is a huge leap. So
no, but I'll tell you,
as that bigger organizations firm, would still be comfortable? Would still be comfortable?
Companies are comfortable. See, as a search firm, in fact, we get paid more fees if we manage to hire a woman for a position because companies are high up. Diversity is very high on companies' agenda to hire more women in the organizations. So at least that's our experience when we deal with our clients.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Karuna, would you like to step in at this point with respect to the maternity law, which is near perfect in text? How do you feel this is going to be playing out in the coming years on ground?
First, I want to congratulate the government, and this doesn't happen often. So I want to congratulate the government on passing this enhanced maternity entitlement for women. Now, the thing is that I think it's very important not to be sort of overly defensive about this survey or any other survey. And if Mr. Goenka, if Vineet Goenka has any questions about the methodology, then he should go into the methodology and question the actual methodology. A sample size of 300 companies is actually not bad. Coming to the crux of the problem, look, I think the way that TeamLease has framed the survey and framed the results of the survey is a little bit alarmist and a little bit problematic, because I think that the way you frame, while I think, let me just say to Rituparna that I'm glad that these questions are being asked of companies, and I like her approach in terms of looking at if there is a problem, looking at raising the contours of the problem towards a possible solution. I will also say that, Vineet Goenka is not wrong. There are other surveys, and there has been a Mint survey, for example, looking at the fact that companies actually enhance efficiency, profits, the bottom line, when they retain talented employees by giving them adequate maternity leave. So let's put that front and center. Now, secondly, this would probably not be a problem for large companies. This would probably be more of a problem for small and medium enterprises, which I think is something that the survey is pointing to. And look, there are a number of solutions, and I'm going to point out the top three. First is that the country took very well, I think, to the education cess. And I think there's no reason that there shouldn't be participation from government in helping small and medium enterprises to bear the cost of the employee or to share the cost of the employee who is deserving of the leave. Second thing is that I do think that a paternity leave is extremely important, because not only do fathers have a right to be involved in their children's lives, and this is very much one of the purposes of feminism, to sort of allow equal participation by all genders in different areas of life. And parenting is so important and so valuable to fathers as well as mothers. And I also think that, once that paternity leave is accounted for, then there's a way in which the backlash is something that will in itself get modulated and mitigated, because then it means that who are you discriminating against, One way of looking at it is to say that, okay, you have so much parental leave and the cost is shared by the employer of the father and by the employer of the mother, 50-50, regardless of who takes it. Now, the third thing I will say, and this is where unfortunately the government has comprehensively failed, is that we need, when you pass a law like that, you have to be very clear about about having a provision which prevents backlash discrimination, right? Therefore, and we don't have a non-discrimination legislation, which a lot of people have been campaigning for. Tarun Kabir from Oxford has been working on this for a very long time.
Okay.
And I think Shashi Tharoor had introduced a private members bill, which got no traction. And there are various efforts by various people to have a non-discrimination law. And what does that non-discrimination law do? It says that, look, if you are a new mother, or if you are pregnant, or if you are just a woman who doesn't want to be sexually harassed, though let's be clear that the anti-sexual harassment law does have such a provision, right? So that's better drafted in that sense.
All right, okay.
Then the
all right,
company
you've put three broad points across there.
Against you in this manner. It must be barred from doing that.
Okay, all right, Karuna, well taken into account. Let's get in Raman at this point. Given the fact that the survey has largely indicated, like across 10 sectors, you have established industries such as aviation, information technology, real estate, education, e-commerce that are going to be facing the heat of this, but most being for SMEs and startups, digital platforms. How are you handling this?
Well, definitely. I think for startup companies, it comes as a bit of a negative thing, because if you look at the entire ecosystem, the talent, especially at a startup, comes at a premium, and the amount of resources and the amount of investment it takes to actually train and groom employees. It can be women employees or it can be male employees, of course. There's a lot of money which gets invested, and from a startup perspective, if you kind of have this kind of a law and you're kind of spending so much money on training and grooming female employees, kind of seeing that kind of all that investment going away for 6 months is a bit hard to take, definitely. And I think from a startup perspective, it definitely doesn't really kind of suit us. I don't know exactly the findings of this, but I believe the policies have to be framed. Certainly for the medium, the small, as well as the startup companies, it should be something which is more favorable in the sense that all the investment which the company makes, I think it should be kind of recognized as well. Of course, the tax benefits, if they come into play, of course, that's going to be, of course, good as well. But definitely, I think it's something which it has to be looked into, because the resources are strained when a startup is operating anyways. And I believe this should be looked at in terms of resources.
And the law does, without saying, take into account startups as well, because it says any establishment which is employing bare minimum of 10 people, which is where this is going to be applicable. So without doubt, you do have startups coming in under that ambit. Okay. Ritvika, listening to each of those voices here that have come in, as an independent observer here of this, Karuna, I'm going to come to you in just a bit, taking in opening remarks from all. Ritvika, in your view, do you feel that the findings of this survey are creating negativity out of a law which was essentially meant as a huge benefit for working mothers in the country?
I am a little nervous, I'll be honest to you. I think, my only fear is that it might actually pull us back from a direction which is right to take. Maybe the fear that if companies are hiring lesser women will mean that lesser women will disclose whether or not they are planning to be mothers or they're expecting. that actually has a lashback not just on the policy side but on the women applicant side. But to be completely fair, it isn't something which is unexpected, because this is, any policy takes quite a bit of time to roll out in its effectiveness, and this is only the first year. And so I gather that, if you look at a lot of Scandinavian countries who did roll out a lot of these policies, if you look at West Coast in the United States, where a lot of states have rolled out similar policies, in due course they have been accepted with open arms. The question is, are we also being impatient in expecting that within the course of 1 year a policy will be rolled out effectively? I think we should do this survey. I think the first year it's great, but we should continue to do this survey 2 or 3 times more in another few years to be able to assess how people are accepting it, companies are accepting it. One quick point, I know we have a startup owner and I'm an entrepreneur myself. The question that I keep wondering though is that for larger companies this has always been a priority. But when it comes to smaller companies, whether it is MSMEs, startups or SMEs, this is something of a hesitation, because unlike other Western countries, in India talent is perceived to be abundant. And so when someone goes away for 6 months, unlike other countries, we think we can quickly replace it. And that's something that we need to be mindful of, is we need to actually value our women employees for their talent and not be so quick to shun. And I think that's a cultural shift which will come in due course.
All right. Well put there. Vineet, would you like to react to some of those responses here? Would you like to take this first as an honest feedback that you have startups, smaller setups, SMEs that have perhaps not been taken into account with respect to the kind of financial burden that they would be facing?
So let me take this opportunity to tell you, apart from this particular regulation which has come up, there are 2 more benefits which have been given to the employer if they are not aware. Now in the EPF itself, if you see, to encourage more employment, new employees till 3 years need not participate, the employer need not contribute their part of the EPF. That is one increase, one of the incentives which has been passed on to them. Second one is, if you see, there is ESIC scheme. Under the ESIC scheme, the employee only contributes 1.75% of the total salary which is taking up. And whereas the limit which was earlier 15,000 now has come to 21,000 rupees. So if you see, many of the female employees who come under 21,000 rupees are already covered under ESIC, and ESIC provides the cost. The cost does not go to employer. So in case some employer is not educated on that, he should be told that this is not going to go out of your pocket, but ESIC is going to bear the cost. And I have some encouraging figures where I see there are more employment generated. Like for example, take example of Jammu Kashmir, where a new entrepreneur, female entrepreneur, gets very less interest rates, subsidized interest rates for female entrepreneurs in Kashmir. If you take another example, Haryana has already started giving 15 days paternity leave. Now these are encouragements which are there. As I said, Indian Railways has already asked for RPF employees. So there are 4,500 female employees who will be taken in RPF itself. The magazine of Indian Railway which is going to come for May itself is pink. So there are very much encouragement. Now this is a paradox. There is a conflict when the government wants to improve the conditions of females who are working. There may be people who may feel pinched because there is a wafer thin margin. Now here we all have to come together to educate them. This is a temporary cost, but in the long term it is going to help everybody. So whenever there are laws being made, there will be some time to implement. And if there are ULPs, if there are unfair labor practices by some employer, this can be brought to the notice of the authorities who are there. So there are encouragements. Now let me once again repeat. The LinkedIn survey says the job has gone up. The Hindu Business Line Avatar Group and Working Mother Media says the jobs have gone up. That's what NASSCOM says. Exactly. So I don't know how this particular one company whose methodology has not been defined says that the jobs have come down for females. I'll give you one more example. WE, women entrepreneurs. Now this is a word which has been
not already come down. It's a projection for the coming year.
Of the shares by women. No, I think the entire methodology is under question. The quantum, the methodology and the intent. See, I personally believe that there is more jobs which are going to females. And entrepreneurship, you see, female entrepreneurship has gone up very high.
All right. Ritu, would you like to step in at this point? Because once again, also, credibility being questioned, methodology being questioned here as well of TeamLease. You have done
one more last
in this
line,
survey.
I've
read through your report. It's about 20 pages. It is also broken down the scene in each state. In each state, you've taken these figures across the country and broken down various employers across states as well.
Yes. So I think the purpose of my coming to this show today is not to really establish TeamLease credibility. I think that's left to my corporates, my customers, and my shareholders. I think the purpose of today's, of this particular research is essentially divert everyone's attention to this particular challenge at this point of time. However, it's not really a call to action for government. I think I'm repeatedly saying, and I've been saying since the time the amendment has been passed, that this particular amendment has been done with just the right intent. I think what exactly should be done, I think the report also, and I think anyone who would want to question the methodology, please feel free to download the entire report. It's already available on our website and go through it. I think we have done it with absolute detail. We've covered states, we've covered each of the 10 sectors. We've also categorized the different groups of people. But there's one thing I'd like to add. I think it's really a time for us as an industry. Essentially, we do have trailblazers and role models in the form of these large organizations, professionally managed, who have figured out how to make use of this amendment. We have to get them to come out and speak about their success stories so that they can challenge some of the panic and probably apprehension that the SMEs and the startups have. Honestly, if somebody gets down to doing the maths, even if a woman takes 2 6-month leaves, but if the person becomes productive for 25 years, there is an upside to it. So I honestly don't have anything against the I think that's how it's touted to be, but let me just clarify. I think 6 months or 26 weeks is required. However, we have to make it acceptable to a bigger cross-section of organizations, which, by the way, are the majority in this country, to kind of adopt this. I think we have to help through amnesty schemes. And that's where the government needs to acknowledge this as a challenge. And I'm sure together we can figure out a solution to this issue.
Okay, Karuna, do you feel that this is an initial panic, or do you feel that the government needs to be sending out its team there to assuring employers that this is not as bad for you as you're making it out to be? This should have been work done in the past year and hasn't been done on ground.
I'm not going to blame this particular government for that aspect, because I think that when there's a legislation, it's in general a good idea to pass a finance bill to cost that legislation and to see what it will take to make it a reality. And because you then bring all the stakeholders at the table and you see what funds are required to be allocated, right? However, I will say that whenever there's a legislation, it's a good idea to have a communications program, and this government actually is particularly good at communications, to make sure that people know about what it is. Like the ECIS point that Vineet Goenka made was well taken. However, I just looked it up, and the ECIS form on the website only allows for claiming back of 12 weeks, which is as per the old legislation, and not the entire 26 weeks. So if that's going to be corrected as to the new law, or whether only 12 weeks will be compensated, is something that should be looked at. However, I do want to say that there are there's one fallacy in a report of the TeamLease survey that has been reported. I don't know if it's true in the survey itself, which is that there seems to be an impression that only when you have a certain number of female employers you need to provide a creche. That's not the case. If you have male employees also, if you have, I think it's 50, if you have about 50 male employees, if you have 50 employees of any gender, you still need to provide the creche, right? So that's one point of clarity. And look, I think one very simple thing for the government to consider.
Karuna, hold your thought. We need to very quickly take in a view that's coming in from one of our callers here. We have Vijay from Mumbai. Vijay, if my voice is going through, please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for including. I know I'm looking at the debate going on. I welcome all the changes, what's happening. The ground reality is, I think, what requires is the education of the entrepreneurs, whether it is medium scale or others. Because many times these people are, hard pressed on their top line and bottom line, and that is the reason, where they look for the shortcuts. So what they need to know is particularly what I think we are talking about the creche also. So, coming the burden of the maternity, additional 14 weeks plus maintenance of all those things are to it. They are not even.
Okay, all right. We got your point, Vijay. I'm afraid the line is a bit bad, but we've got the gist of what you're saying as far as educating employers is concerned, because the benefits, of course, being immense to the woman, to the expectant mom. But as far as employers are concerned, the responsibility is to take decisions on formalizing work from home policies. The responsibility is to arrange for creche facilities, 4 breaks per day to arrange for the creche, for the childcare here as well. So there's a list of responsibilities here for the employers, which is why we're seeing this initial panic on ground. Vineet, yes, would you like to step in at this point? Should the government now also be further perhaps educating employers dealing with a large workforce here that it is not all that bad? And we heard that from Raman as well, saying that it's an absolute blow to startups.
See, I would say that the government is doing every bit to encourage female and empower the female and workforces here. There is one small example which I like to tell you is that in Ministry of Shipping, there has been creche started and where the fathers are taking the babies. So it is one more step towards empowering women. Now, whenever these kind of steps are taken, we have to educate and we have to share this. So that's why I'm sharing this. That in specifically in the Parivan Bhavan itself, one creche has been started where I know bureaucrats, male bureaucrats bringing their babies there. Now, another example I would like to give you here is if you go out and see how much loan were dispersed under Mudra loans or self-help groups loans. Now, these have empowered people under BPL to go out and start their own enterprises. So I have seen a lot of stalls coming out of the small chaws which are there in Mumbai, or if you go to agriculture side, there are females who are trying to do their bit in the agriculture.
No, but Vineet, you're going off on another tangent. Let's just stick to what the government is doing with respect to the maternity law.
Give me 10 seconds.
No. I do not want these studies with respect to other. No, not at all. Raman, is there a specific question that you have for Vineet with respect to how you feel startups would suffer because of the maternity law? Is there a specific question? You said that it is a huge blow. Why is it a huge blow? And how do you feel that the government should be addressing this?
Surely. Absolutely. I think there was a point made in the middle in which, of course, if you look at the long-term aspect of the women employee turning out to be very kind of more like a gem for the company, if of course she stays on for 25 years. But let's just face it, on average, I expect the kind of, the way the startups are these days, it's very hard for startups to survive. The environment is very difficult. The investments and the fundraise is not so easy. So we're talking about a time span of 25 years. That's very long. Even if a startup survives for longer than 5 years, that's a success. So I believe for such a short time span, including and having and giving all these benefits away to kind of female employees, certainly is of course one of the very big points which have to be looked at. And in terms of the figures which are being pointed out, I still feel that it may be good from a regulatory aspect or from a government policy action. But certainly if you look at the ground level reality, of course, and look at the private sector in which these startups primarily operate, it is a pretty different scenario altogether where, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the talent comes at a premium. The costs of training and grooming people is very high. And then the retention aspect is also kind of is a very difficult problem to solve if you look at it, because attrition is very high anyways. And of course, we definitely would like more steps to be taken for the betterment of female employees. But I still feel that as a startup, it is very important to consider.
it's coming.
Right. So Sudarshan, would you like to agree with the points here that are being raised by Raman, or would you say that big corporates, big companies are still largely can take care of these costs, because we're looking at a chunk of 26 weeks now?
Absolutely. Look, I think big companies have always been doing it, most of them, even without this law in place. But I think, as Raman said, I would just allude to his point. It's the startups and the small and medium enterprises which probably require some sort of an incentive or support to ensure. Look, I think these are teething troubles when you're trying to come up with a new regulation. And I think more than the law, I think it has to come as a spirit. So people also have to kind of step in and to ensure that there is more women in our workforce. So there is more to be done, and it's also a collective responsibility on that front.
Right. Ritika, would you agree with that? This is a collective responsibility irrespective of whether the law exists or not.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. But I think, there are some issues, and it goes back to the fact, to what Raman said partly. As a startup, even as a small or medium enterprises, the collective responsibility gets diluted when you have to run a business and when you have to make revenue and optimally a profit as well. And so when you do have to create these incentives and you have two people with the same credentials, one a woman and one a man, the reality on ground is that you prefer a man, because at the same time you're thinking, what if she decides to grow her family or have a family, and then I have to bear the cost of that. So it is a collective thinking that needs to be changed. What concerns me is that is a grave change, and perhaps as women are more empowered in due course, we will get to that point. But perhaps we need to introduce some components which will also prompt this change now.
Okay, I'm not sure if you've got the line back on Vineet there. Vineet, would you like to respond? There are certain aspects. All right, we repatch. There's certain aspects here, Vineet, that the government would need to take into account, despite the exhaustive work that has gone into formulating this amendment, this new law. These are reactions, these are responses that you're getting from on ground. These are voices who are in the business of running companies and taking employers. You will have to take this in the right spirit, instead of being so personal about it, saying that this is rubbish.
See, I'll try to break this into three parts. The people who are already covered under ESIC, they are not doing. Big corporates, PSUs and government employees, they're protected. The issue comes with MSME and small entrepreneurs. Here, I think we both have to work together, the public and the private. Awareness flows through government also, and as well as the private corporates have to make an awareness. This is 50% of the population. We have to take care of them. If we empower women, I think we all will benefit in the long term. And it's not only women. I think we'll also have to educate people about hiring veterans. We'll have to also educate people of hiring transgenders, LGBTs. So this kind of laws will come up, the paternity leaves will come up, hiring Divyangs will come up, all these people will come up. And I think here what we'll have to do is, we will have to educate the business. But once again, I would like to point out one thing. We have to take surveys which are done by serious organizations and who have some kind of credibility. Because we go on discussing like this, it will kill the entire purpose. The purpose of the law was to empower women. I think.
All right. No one's trying to kill the purpose here. No, Vineet, no one's trying to kill the purpose, and no one's trying to try to shoot down TeamLease as well. I think it's very unfair to be targeting TeamLease. If they've come out with a report, if they come out with some finding, of course, it's not a figment of their imagination. They've spoken to 300 employers, and that should be taken into account. Karuna, are we looking away from certain aspects that even at a time when maternity leave just a year ago was just 12 weeks, now we're looking at 26 weeks. Even at a time when it was 12 weeks, there were several women going to court saying that they have been terminated from their jobs despite being promoted, despite being declared as team leaders, and their work has been terminated suddenly because they're now expecting. So this has happened even when we were dealing with 12 weeks of leave on ground. So why hasn't the government taken into account that this would be faced when you have 26 weeks of leave? This would be there would be a vehement opposition of dealing with far more weeks of leave now.
You know, a lot has been said about women working in large companies and there not being a problem there. That's actually not true. There are people who have come to me who have suffered discrimination after their maternity leave. Either they have not been promoted or they have been basically put in a position that they have to leave, right? And the benefit, I mean, without much of a remedy. Now, there are two things that I would like to leave us with. One, that the burden can't be entirely, I think the point about startups and micro enterprises and even medium enterprises is well taken. I do agree with you that the government should have considered these things before and done pilot programs before making such things into law. And I think that on an ongoing basis, I think governments, whether it's state governments, whether it's central governments, should do two things: do pilot programs, and also a finance bill, bring all the stakeholders together, allocate responsibilities, cost it, see what's required. Now, I think that the 2 points that I want to leave us with are that children are not just women's responsibilities. Children are societal responsibilities as well as parental responsibilities. So therefore, the cost cannot just be on the mother and the mother's employer. So therefore, I think there are, we need to look at parental leave. This will solve many of the problems, because then you're not just discriminating
All right.
against
This is
women.
something, of course, you've raised earlier as well, something that other political parties who were not in agreement with the draft of the bill, of the amendment, had raised, that paternity leave has not been taken into account. Appreciate all the voices here that have come in. We only hope that all this is taken in the right spirit, not negatively. At the end of the day, each given survey, the intention of a survey is not to pull down or run down or belittle the government's efforts. It is only to ensure that things are running smooth as per intention of the government. So this time the request to the government is not to blindly rubbish or belittle the findings of an exhaustive, well-meaning survey. The intent, without doubt, of the maternity law is for the benefit of working mothers. There are cases of jobs terminated, of expectant moms, even when the paid leave, as I said earlier, was just 12 weeks. So now when we're armed with 26 weeks at hand, how do we retain our jobs if corporate feels double the heat? And why wasn't this aspect taken into account? Let's get a little bit more real than we've already been. We have a good-looking, good-sounding law at hand that makes us proud. It puts us at par with some of the most developed nations of the world, that being Canada and Norway. But there's clearly something missing, something not exactly working on ground here. So let's fix this soon. Thanks for being with us.